Hello and welcome to News Central TV. My name is Mazino Appeal. Here are stories making headlines beyond the continent. Auschwitz survivors returned to the infamous Nazi death camp on Monday as the world commemorated 80 years since its liberation. The Auschwitz camp, a grim symbol of Nazi Germany's genocide, saw the death of over 1 million Jews and more than 100,000 non-Jews between 1940 and 1945. Elderly survivors, some donning scarves resembling the blue and white striped uniform they once wore, laid flowers and observed a moment of silence at the camp's wall of death. The anniversary marks the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau by Soviet troops on January 27, 1945, a moment that exposed the atrocities of the Holocaust to the world. In the meantime, a memorial wall bearing the names of Holocaust victims has been inaugurated in Strasbourg on the site of the synagogue destroyed by the Nazis in 1940. Speaking at the ceremony, Strasbourg Mayor Jean Barseguian highlighted the significance of the tribute, which lists 1,896 names of those deported and 86 victims executed by the Nazis at Strashof in 1943. The wall stands as a solemn reminder of the atrocities committed during the Holocaust and honors the memories of those who perished.
En nous inclinant aujourd'hui devant les noms des disparus, en faisant de ce jardin un lieu de vie, nous démontrons que la vie justement a gagné. Nous nous dressons solennellement contre l'oubli, contre la différence, et nous affirmons les valeurs fondamentales qui nous unissent, la liberté, l'égalité, la fraternité et la démocratie. La lutte contre l'antisémitisme, c'est un combat pour la République elle-même. Car une République qui tolère que ses citoyens soient ciblés pour leur origine ou leur identité n'est plus fidèle à ses valeurs universalistes. C'est à nous d'agir, en condamnant les actes et en sanctionnant les auteurs, en dénonçant publiquement les discours de haine, en apportant un soutien concret aux victimes, en renforçant l'éducation et la formation, en étant d'une vigilance absolue et d'une sévérité exemplaire.
Leurs noms sont désormais inscrits côte à côte sur ce mur du souvenir. Les 1896 noms de celles et ceux qui nous ont été arrachés. Et les 86 noms des victimes exécutées par les nazis au Struthof en 1943. Nous avons voulu ici un lieu ouvert à toutes et tous, un lieu de vie, de célébration et de transmission, un lieu qui résistera à l'épreuve du temps, un mur des noms qui se dresse face au fléau du négationnisme, de l'effacement.
Que ce jardin soit un lieu de paix, un lieu de transmission et un lieu d'éveil, qu'il nous rappelle toujours de ne jamais détourner le regard, de ne jamais nous cacher et de toujours répondre présent à l'appel de l'histoire et de l'humanité. Je vous remercie.
Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday hailed Soviet troops for ending what he described as the total evil of Auschwitz, marking the 80th anniversary of the Red Army's liberation of the Nazi death camp. When Soviet forces arrived at Auschwitz on January 27, 1945, they found 7,000 survivors, becoming the first Allied troops to uncover the horrors of the camp. President Putin reaffirmed his commitment to protecting the rights of all people to their ethnic, linguistic, and spiritual identities. He also vowed to combat anti-Semitism, Russophobia, and other forms of racism, emphasizing the need to prevent the resurgence of such ideologies. Now, Friedrich Merz, leader of Germany's center-right CDU party, and a leading candidate for chancellor in next month's elections, has called on the SPD, Greens, and FDP to support his bill aimed at significantly reducing illegal migration to Germany. Speaking at a press conference in Berlin, Merz emphasized that he was not seeking a different majority in the Bundestag, but instead called for cross-party support to address what he described as the still far too high levels of illegal immigration. The proposal reflects growing concerns within the CDU over migration policies, with Merz using a more stringent approach as Germany prepares for oncoming elections.
Ich will erneut mein Angebot an die Sozialdemokraten und die Grünen, aber auch die FDP erneuern, diesen Weg mit uns zu gehen. Ich suche keine anderen Mehrheiten im Deutschen Bundestag, sondern ich möchte, dass die Sozialdemokraten und die Grünen und auch die FDP jetzt wirklich zur Vernunft kommen und Maßnahmen ergreifen, gesetzgeberische Maßnahmen ergreifen, die uns die Möglichkeit geben, die nach wie vor viel zu hohen Zahlen der illegalen Migration nach Deutschland drastisch zu reduzieren. Ich weiß, dass das
Rising water levels in the Vilaine River have surpassed the 2001 flood record in Guichen-Pont-Riant, a town in western France. Located south of Reims in Brittany, the area is grappling with severe flooding, with streets submerged and properties at risk. The rapid rise in water has forced local residents to act swiftly, moving belongings and seeking higher ground. Emergency teams remain on high alert as the community navigates the unfolding crisis, with persistent heavy rainfall exacerbating the situation. Authorities are working to minimize damage and provide necessary support to those affected. The region continues to face the aftermath of the severe weather, with efforts underway to aid recovery and assist impacted residents.
Nous, ça fait 15 ans qu'on habite là. Non, on a eu un peu d'eau jusque-là, mais pas plus.
J'étais un peu surprise déjà parce que je suis venue hier pour surélever juste le matériel informatique et les copieurs et enfin voilà tout ce qui craignait en tout cas, et en fait là l'eau monte très vite, donc je surélève en plus avec de l'aide heureusement les parpaings, avec des parpaings en fait tous les meubles en bois massifs qui craignent le plus. Après tout ce qui est métallique, ben voilà, on laisse ça de toute façon, voilà, on pourra rien y changer, donc on fait au mieux.
Now, thousands of students protesters shut down a major road junction in Belgrade on Monday, intensifying pressures on the Serbian government following the deadly collapse of a train station roof in November. The 24-hour blockade comes on the heels of a general strike last Friday, which saw widespread participation from lawyers, small businesses, and schools across Serbia. Demonstrators are demanding accountability for the November 1 tragedy in Novi Sad, where 15 people lost their lives at a new renovated train station. Protests and roadblocks have become a daily occurrence nationwide, with many Serbians blaming the disaster on corruption and inadequate construction oversight. Student organizers have vowed to continue the demonstrations until their demands for justice and reform are met. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has reaffirmed the military support for President Donald Trump's expanded migrant deportation operations. This comes after Colombia initially blocked 2 U.S. military aircrafts carrying deported Colombian citizens over the weekend. The move prompted President Trump to threaten economic tariffs, leading to Colombia reversing its stance and agreeing to accept the repatriation flights. In addition to addressing deportations, Hegseth announced plans for new executive orders aimed at removing diversity, equity, and inclusion programs from the Pentagon. He also confirmed efforts to reinstate military personnel who were discharged for failing to comply with the now rescinded COVID-19 vaccine mandate.
Support of mass deportations in support of the president's objective. That is something the Defense Department absolutely will continue to do. Today, there are more executive orders coming that we fully support on removing DEI inside the Pentagon, reinstating troops who were pushed out because of COVID mandates, Iron Dome for America. This is happening quickly. Our job is lethality and readiness and warfighting.
Well, I've got a short break, and when we return, displaced Palestinians return to northern Gaza after hostage deal. This and more after the break. Welcome back. Now, masses of displaced Palestinians began returning to the northern Gaza Strip on Monday after Israel and Hamas reached an agreement for the release of 6 more hostages. Israel had previously restricted movement back to the north, citing Hamas violations of the truce terms. However, late Sunday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office announced that Palestinians would be allowed to pass following the new deal. Early Monday, crowds could be seen walking along coastal roads carrying their belongings as they moved towards northward. The agreement preserves a fragile ceasefire and raises hopes for additional hostage prisoners exchange. The conflict, ongoing for over 15 months, has left the Gaza Strip in ruins and displaced nearly all its residents.
الفرحة الكاملة لو انه خسرت كل ربعي واهلي، لكن فرحان مبسوط انه جاي على بلدي وعلى منطقة السجاعية. كل الفرحة بإرادة رب العالمين انه روحنا على غزة على السجاعية. كانت طفلة صغيرة. هذه ابوها استشهد، بنتي. ابوها استشهد، جردنا 1.5 سنة وفدى الوطن، فدى فلسطين. انا لميته شقف بقانونس. والحمد لله انا من الفرح قاعد بعيط. بدي شيء، بدي اخش بلدي ومنطقتي ولو باكل رمل.
مبسوط الحمد لله كثير. إلنا 3 أيام صفين على حاجز في السقعة طول الليل، لما فتحوا لنا اياه الصبح على الساعه 6 خشينا الحمد لله، وهينا وصلنا هان على بلدنا وعلى غزه الحمد لله رب العالمين.
الي يومين على التوالي، وهذا الثالث اللي تشبشبنا فيه بالسقعة. إلنا يومين على التوالي بالطخ والعذاب والموت والاطفال، وضلينا نولع نار ويطخوا علينا يقولوا لنا ارجعوا، بدناش نرجع. ضلينا صامدين لما حديت رجعنا لاراضينا، ضلينا صامدين لما رجعنا على غزه.
والله لو قالوا لنا زحفنا كمان زحفين، واساس انه نرجع على ارضنا وعلى ترابنا.
Meanwhile, Israeli President Isaac Herzog has announced that approximately 6 more hostages will be released from Gaza this week. Speaking at the inauguration of a synagogue in New York, President Herzog expressed gratitude to those involved in securing the agreement and extending the ongoing ceasefire. He highlighted the significance of international cooperation in achieving these developments and praised the efforts made to ensure the hostages' safe return. This comes amid continued efforts to stabilize the region and address the humanitarian and security challenges in the aftermath of recent conflicts.
אנחנו נשמע בעזרת השם בקרוב השבוע על עוד 6 חטופות וחטופים שיחזרו הביתה. אני מברך את כל העושים במלאכה של ההסדר שגובש היום, גם ההסדר של הארכת הפסקת האש עם לבנון. להחלמת הפצועים בגוף ובנפש, להצלחת חיילי צה"ל באשר הם, ולשובם של כל המפונים בצפון ובדרום הביתה.
It's a fragile agreement. It really is. The Qataris were enormously relevant. They were the people who were dialoguing with Hamas. The Egyptians were important. Everybody in the region was important. Ron Dermer, endeavor. But we got to get them all out. We have to implement the agreement in a correct way. That's why I'm going over to Israel on Wednesday. I'm going to be at Auschwitz also tomorrow, but then on to Israel. Because the implementation here is the critical thing. The execution of the agreement was important. It was a first step, but without the implementation correct, we're not going to get it right, and we're going to have a flare-up, and that's not a good thing. So,
President Trump's Gaza stance has sparked discord with Arab America, a base that voted him in high numbers during the November general elections. Now, the president's proposal to relocate Gaza Palestinians to neighboring nations like Jordan or Egypt faces fierce opposition from crucial supporters within his voting bloc. For News Central, international correspondent Afia Hagen has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump has expressed his desire for Egypt and Jordan to accommodate Palestinians from Gaza. Trump indicated he had approached Jordan's King Abdullah with this request and intended to discuss it with Egypt's president.
Because I'm looking at the whole Gaza Strip right now, and it's a mess. It's a real mess.
So you'd like Jordan to house people from
I'd like
Gaza?
him to take people. I'd like Egypt to take people. I'm talking to General al-Sisi tomorrow, sometime I believe. And I'd like Egypt to take people, and I'd like Jordan to take people.
Both Hamas and the Palestinian Authority voiced their opposition to the suggestion. Jordan and Egypt have likewise dismissed the proposition, saying this would amount to the displacement of the Palestinian people. A truce is currently in effect in Gaza, following an agreement between Israel and Hamas to suspend hostilities that began when Hamas launched an attack on Israel on the 7th of October 2023. Over 47,000 Palestinians, mostly civilians, have lost their lives in Israel's military campaign, according to Gaza's Hamas-administered health ministry. The majority of Gaza's 2 million inhabitants have been forced to flee their homes during the past 15 months of conflict, which have devastated much of Gaza's infrastructure. Jordan's foreign minister declared the kingdom remained resolute and steadfast in opposing Palestinian displacement. Trump's declaration has caused early friction with a crucial voter base that helped secure his victory in November. The degree to which Arab American voters supported Trump was largely influenced by the Biden administration's response to the Gaza situation. A significant number of Arab Americans in regions such as Michigan were instrumental in Trump's triumph. The ceasefire in Gaza initially appeared to validate their decision, but has swiftly been questioned following Trump's statements. Arab Americans are opposed to the idea of Palestinians being removed from their land in Gaza. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagan.
And still, for more on this, I'm joined by international correspondent Afia Hagan. Afia, good evening once again. What has been the wide response to Trump's comments on Gaza, if you will? Tell us, please.
Well, yes, you heard in my report there that Arab Americans across America at the moment are quite surprised and disappointed by his comments, which they feel amount to basically Palestinians being displaced from their land. Egypt and Jordan have said pretty much the same thing, but far-right lawmakers in Israel have welcomed this idea because this has long been something that they have been hankering after, that Palestinians should be removed from their land or their land should be occupied by Jewish settlers. Now, there was a chairman of a coalition of Arab Americans who successfully lobbied to vote for Donald Trump, and they released a statement yesterday that said Arab Americans for Trump firmly rejects President Donald J. Trump's suggestion to remove voluntarily or forcibly Palestinians in Gaza, to Egypt or Jordan, and whether that's temporarily or whether that is permanently. So there have been a lot of pushback, I think, to these statements that basically would amount to Palestinians being removed from their land. Now, we didn't get, when he was giving those sound bites on Air Force One, we didn't get whether he meant that this should be a permanent or a temporary solution. But either way, it has not been well received.
So what's the latest on the thousands returning in northern Gaza? We saw some visuals of those from earlier.
Absolutely, show those aerial shots of over 200,000 people who have made their way mostly on foot, but some of them in cars, across the checkpoints that opened at 5 a.m. GMT. Like I said, most people on foot, over 200,000 of them, have crossed back into Gaza from where they were displaced. Now, what they will be returning to is probably going to be mostly destroyed. It's thought about 3/4 of Gaza, especially the northern part of Gaza, has been destroyed. But so many of them are so desperate to be back home in their homeland, but they don't know what they're going home to and what they are facing. And for them, the struggle continues. It's now about shelter, about utilities, about finding running water and where they will live until their homes in Gaza are rebuilt.
And what do you know about the hostages then, the ones that are being released this week?
Well, yes, we had news today that 8 of the 33 hostages that are due to be released in this period of the ceasefire, unfortunately, have already died, and their bodies will be returned at some point during this ceasefire. That means that 25 hostages are still alive. 4 more hostages, we believe, will be released to the Red Cross this week on Thursday, and more hostages will be released on Saturday also.
Sad about the deaths. But Afia, thank you very much for bringing us the details. Thank you. And that's all Beyond the Continent this evening. To remember, you can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and of course on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. My name is Mazino Appeal.